Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online video with me, Sherman. Today we are going to be talking about the new build I created, Northern Storm, or Northern Wind, sorry, Northern Wind version 2.0. I'm kind of excited to talk about it because I just finished it last night. Yesterday, and I ran it through a bunch of dungeons, ran it through on normal vet mode. I started on normal to see how it would handle it, then I went in on vet and I ran out the dungeons on vet, and it was just the daily dungeons from yesterday. And then last night I ran the daily dungeons for today to see how well it would really handle those ones as well. And going through each of those different dungeons, Dire Frost Keep, Spindle Clutch 2, I don't remember, it was not Cradle of Shadows, it was, what was that? I want to say it was the Runes, no it wasn't Runes Monstune, it was White Gold Tower. So White Gold Tower wasn't too bad on vet mode. It had a little bit of challenge to it. It just it put a hamper on my stuff because of it has different mechanics than what the normal dungeons have. So it took me a little bit to get used to playing this build in there, but once I got comfortable playing the build in there, it was like everything just clicked and I just kept my character going. And it was funny because I was running with a Magicka healer, of course, because there is no stamina healer, but there was a Magicka healer. I was running with a Sork, and then I was running with a Nightblade that was running bow. And all I did was I asked the Nightblade, I said, hey, do you have this unlocked on your Nightblade? And he goes, no. And I said, well, could you unlock Mark Target? And he goes, why? I said, so that way you have a way of applying Major Breach and Major Fracture on an enemy. He goes, well, what skill would I get rid of on my bars? So I asked him what skills he had equipped, and he had he didn't have any potions, or he was using potions to keep his crit and his weapon damage up. So I told him, I said, well, any one of the skills that you feel is not doing that much for you, you could put that in place of it and use it as a floater spot for this ability when you're running with tanks like me. And he's like, well, I've never seen a tank like you. I didn't even know they existed. So he did that, and he ran Reaper's Mark, and he said he didn't even realize he ran Mark Target until he could morph it, and then he asked me which one to go with, and I told him to go with Reaper's Mark because it was more effective for him. So he was running that Reaper's Mark on every enemy he fought. Man, you'd see that Reaper's Mark go up, and he was just like, bam. And then when we were fighting a boss, he would apply Reaper's Mark for himself, just for his own self-benefit. And he said that he was surprised how well we did on the rest of the bosses. So it was really, really great that the guy listened and took the time to hear me out and the reason why. So, but let's go ahead and get into the build. This is the new Northern Wind, guys, and I'm not kidding you. It works really well. So let's take a look at this. So we have 30k Magicka. I do not have Undaunted yet, so my Magicka and health pool are a little low. But don't worry, you want to have about a 30k Magicka. That's it. You don't want anything higher than this. If you're playing a high elf, you could have 30k Magicka really easy, and you'd have probably 32, 34k health pool with it because you could put more into health than you wouldn't need as much in a Magicka. 10k stamina pool. Now you can use Tri-Stat food, but I can't do that right now because I don't have my Undaunted Metal. Once I get Undaunted Metal, I will be able to run Tri-Stat food and be fine, and I'll still maintain about the same health and Magicka with the same stamina pool. So it'll be fine once I get there. I'll get a little bit more in my magic recovery, but it's not going to affect much. I have a 1900 spell damage, which is fine. When I use entropy, I go over 20 to 2200 spell damage. That's all I need to be effective with this build, and I have a 43% crit. I need that crit for my monster set, and I'll get to that in a second. Next up, we have spell resistance at 22 unbuffed, 22 physical resistance unbuffed. When I buff my character's resistances, I have 28, 27, and then I have 27, 26. Do not worry that it's so low, because you don't need 32k resistances to get by in this game. In fact, people were tanking Maw with less resistances than what I have right now. So if people can tank Maw with less resistances, these resistance values should be fine. I've tanked in a lot of dungeons with 28, 27 physical, and like 26, 27 or 26, 27 physical, and 28 to 29 spells. So I know that'll work for that. Down here you can see I have a spell penetration of 2,167. which is good. I have frost resist, but down here also I run the Lady Mundus Stone to give me the extra resistances I need. And then I have max health, max magicka food with major prophecy up all the time because of inner light. So let's go ahead and take a jump over to the gear. On the gear, we are running 2-piece Ice Heart. Now, this is your main set, like one of your main sets that you're going to want to get. The reason you're going to want Ice Heart is for the critical damage, or the spell crit. So when you do critical damage, you get an Ice Shield that absorbs 9,130 spell damage. It's all damage, not just spell damage. And while the shield holds, you deal 1,010 frost damage to all enemies within 5 meters every second for 6 seconds. So for 6 seconds, you're doing this damage on top of that other damage as well. Now, if you're fighting trash, this shield will just stay up pretty much the whole fight, because they won't be able to burn down 9k unless you're fighting like a troll, or something that can hit you really hard and just strip you of your shield. And then even then, you have another 6 seconds before you can reactivate it, so it'll be right back up. 6 seconds does not go by too long. It's pretty quick. On the main set of gear, now, before I go into the main set of gear, I want you guys to understand, I chose a Nord for a reason. I thought it would be the best option for a tank. A High Elf would be much better for this, with an Argonian second, then a Breton, then a Dark Elf, and then any other race in the game. Now, the reason I put Dark Elf at the end was because the Dark Elf doesn't get the benefits the Breton does, it doesn't get the benefits the Argonian does, and it doesn't get the benefits the High Elf does. The High Elf will always be the top dog for this, because they get 4% frost damage, they get 9% or 10% max magicka, and they get 9% magic recovery. So that's going to make them a more effective build for this, and they'll be able to reach that higher magicka pool really easy, so they can put more into health. So either way they go, High Elf will definitely be the one for this. Now we're going to go in the gear sets. Please understand, this is a tank build, and you have to look at it as a tank build. Do not look at it as DPS, it is a tank build. So we are running 5 pieces heavy, Julianus. 1 piece in the robes. My shoulder right now is light. I want to get it medium reinforced, because you do want the shoulder to be reinforced. It'd be a lot better if this was heavy reinforced and this was medium infused. You want to wear the chest and the legs infused to get that extra bonus from the health glyphs, just to push you up a little bit higher in health. Moving on, you are wearing 4 pieces reinforced. The reason why is to give you that extra damage mitigation that your character is going to need for survivability. Once I get this in reinforced, even in medium, I'll get another 500 spell and physical resistance. Once I get this in medium and this in reinforced, in heavy, my resistance values will change again, but they'll stay pretty similar to what they are now. Alright, so these are what I'm wearing up top. Now what am I going to be wearing below? I'm going to be wearing 3 pieces of willpower with healthy on them. The reason why is because I want the benefits of having a primary set and a secondary set. A secondary set is a 5-piece set that gives you max magicka, spell damage, crit, and a 5-piece bonus. And that's what I got with this setup. Is because of this, I get the 2-piece gives me 1400 max magicka, the 3-piece gives me 186 spell damage, and then if you look up here, I have this piece which gives me a 1-piece of spell critical, and then the 2-piece gives me a total of 2 5-piece sets, and the 5th-piece set gives me the damage shield whenever I do that crit. So this combination is a really good combination for this build, and you want all 3 of these pieces to be healthy. You want to have at least 1 magicka recovery on here and 2 spell damage. Once I get my spell damage to 174 on both of these, and I get this beefed up to the maximum, I will be pushing about 1950 spell damage. That's it. And that spell damage is going to help, because the more damage I'm doing, the more damage the group is doing. So, just saying. Moving on to the staves. Now, I'm not wearing the appropriated staves. It would be best to use a charged Maelstrom staff with this build, because you really don't need the extra damage shield that this gives you, but it still would be a nice option. But a charged Maelstrom staff, ice staff, would be really good on the front bar. On the back bar, a crafted infused staff with Crusher enchantment. Why crafted? Because you don't want to use a Maelstrom staff to lose the benefits of it. So, and that's pretty much the build. My food did wear off. I am running 2 food that gives me two things. I do have Tri-Stat food, and I do have Witch Mother's Brew for when I'm playing in the open world, just running around. It gives me that little bit of extra Magicka recovery, which is kind of nice. So, going to go ahead and eat my food again. And we're going to take a look at skills real quick. So, on the front bar, we have Entropy, and we have Structured Entropy. The reason we're running Structured Entropy is to boost our health a little bit more, because we can't get high health in the kind of gear we are in. So to get that extra health that we need, you know, we're not wearing like Plague Doctors, we're not wearing Ebon, we're not wearing a set that gives us, you know, a secondary set that gives us health. We're wearing a secondary set that gives us Magicka with a little bit of health. So to make up that difference in health, we have to run Structured Entropy. So that's why it's on here. It also grants us minor, major sorcery, which boosts our spell damage. It also gives us a small heal, and a small heal over time, which is kind of good. Next up, we have Blockade of Frost. Now, the reason you're using Blockade of Frost is normal. The Unstable Wall of Frost is a smaller radius on the effect. So if you go over here and you look at this right here, this one does 18 by 12. The other one does a lot smaller radius. It's designed more or less for DPS. The bigger walls, like Elemental Blockade, is made more for tanking, so that way you can hit more enemies to grab their attention and bring them to you in a fight. So if they walk into it, they're going to turn to you and come after you because they're the ones taking the damage from you. Now, you're not going to be doing damage comparable to a DPS, so if a DPS goes to fight one of those enemies, they're going to peel it away from you. So you're going to want to keep your taunt close by and be able to taunt them. We'll get to that in a second. Next up, we have Gripping Shards. Now, this is a really good AoE that slows enemies by 30% movement speed, but it also stacks that 30% with the 60% here, reducing their movement speed, and it is multiplicative. This bonus is. So this 30% multiplies into this 60%. So if you lay down a wall of ice first, then this, it will multiply 30% against the 60%, and it will give you a 9% bonus. Well, actually, it's a little bit more than that. It's like a 15% bonus. So it'll actually reduce their movement speed by 75%. And then on top of that, you immobilize them with Gripping Shards by 3 seconds, and you have a greater chance of applying Chill to them, which means that you apply Minor Maim for 4 seconds. Well, because you apply Chill, and you're using a Charge Staff, and you're playing a Warden, which gets 200%, you're using a Charge Staff, those two things together is a 420% chance to apply Chill. And then you get another 100 from this down here, which means that you have a 520% chance multiplied against the 20%, or not multiplied, but done into this weird math, and against that. So you actually have like a 65% chance to apply Chilled against the enemy, which means that I can guarantee you Chilled is getting applied 100% of the time almost. You have like 100% uptime of Chilled. And if you have 100% uptime of Chilled, that means Minor Maim is going to be applied to them every 4 seconds, because that's how long Chill lasts. And that means they're going to be, their damage is reduced by 4% or by 15% every 4 seconds, no matter what. So it's a really good setup to have that. Make sure you have your Tri-Stat focus, you have Elemental Force, and all these unlocked. You want all these passives for this staff to work, for this build to work, because you want the taunt from the Ice Shield, you want the damage shield from the Ice Shield, you want that when equipped you use Magicka instead of stamina, and then down here you want the Ancient Knowledge, which gives you the Frost Staff, reduces blocking cost by 30% and increases the amount of damage you can block by 20%. You want that as well. That 20% will save your life in a lot of cases when you get hit by some enemies. Along with the damage shield. So now remember, you're using damage shields to absorb 90 to almost 100% of the damage most of the time. So you don't need to block as much, which means you can keep your heavy attacks going more often, which will keep your resource pool full almost 100% of the time as well. Not 100% of the time, because you are going to be using these 3 abilities most of the time. Alright, also we have Inner Light. This is going to give you a boost in Max Magicka. It's also going to give you that boost of critical that you need to keep your Ice Heart active, so you get that damage shield every 6 seconds. Next up we have Northern Storm. This is what the build is actually named after, because it creates a violent storm around you of ice that applies damage every second for 8 seconds, and also reduces the enemy's movement speed by 70%. This 70% gets multiplied against that 65% that you already have, or 75%, and it reduces their movement speed even greater, almost to 100% when this is active. Like, you lock them down, they cannot move. On top of that, you give your group minor or major protection, reducing the incoming damage your group receives by 30%. While slotted, you gain 8% max magicka. It's a very, very powerful ability for a sword, or for the for the ice tank. Alright, moving on to the back bar, we have structured entropy again. The reason why is because we need that extra health when we're on this bar. But if you notice, we took Northern Storm off of this bar. I just have this here for placeholder. But you could put Warhorn here if you wanted to, for in those trial situations, so you can keep that Warhorn up for your group, that kind of thing. So you can do really good burst sessions, to where you can have one person fire Warhorn, another one fire Warhorn, another one fire Warhorn. So you can keep up that 15% for about 24 seconds. So 24 seconds of 15% more damage. That's not only being applied to your group, but it's also being applied to you as well. Is a really good benefit. Alright, moving along, we have Inner Fire. Now this is a taunt that you can use to start the fights with, or you can use your heavy attack from your back bar, where you have that Crusher enchant, where you can reapply that. Anytime you switch to the back bar, try to get a heavy attack off from it, so you get that Crusher enchant applied to the fight as well. Now I get about a 10k armor penetration, or spell penetration, when I do my next ability, along with the fact that I'm using a ice staff, and I have 2k spell penetration already. I can get about a 10k spell penetration just from my own character, without anyone else's help. So, next ability is Elemental Susceptibility. Now the reason why you're running Elemental Susceptibility is because when you apply this, it's going to apply Major Breach, but anytime you do damage, it stays applied. So it just reapplies it every time you do damage to it. So this will stay up for the maximum duration of 100% uptime. It never goes off unless you die, and it'll still stay active for 21 seconds after you die. Anyway, so if somebody gets you up within that 21 seconds, you do damage to it, it gets reapplied for another 21 seconds. So this will stay on them 100% of the time. Next up, we have Ice Fortress. Now, Ice Fortress is a really great ability because it gives you and those people standing within 5 meters of you, Major Ward and Major Resolve, or 8 meters. Sorry, 8 meters of you will get Major Ward and Major Resolve. It is a pretty big area. If you watch when I cast it, you see that little ice cloud on the ground? That's the area it will affect. So anyone standing in that area gets that ice shield. So really powerful thing there. Let's go back into here. Oh gosh, I'm winning the champion points. So yeah, so Ice Fortress is really powerful. Next up, Inner Light again, because you need this on your bar for that extra magicka and you're not focused on doing a bunch of abilities, because your main focus is applying those 3 abilities here on the front bar and doing heavy attack. So that's how your build works. This is some of your group support right here, and the rest of it's all group support. So it's all about keeping that minor maim applied. It's all about keeping that damage shield up, keeping this up for your group to keep that damage off of them. So whenever this comes off cooldown, fire it off. Anytime it comes off cooldown, just fire it off. Don't even be hesitant to be afraid to use it. Just fire it off, because you generate 200 ultimate pretty quick in this game. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say. Why aren't you using any of the other abilities from the other trees? They're not needed. For this build, they are not needed. Betty Netch would be nice, because whenever I use it, I could generate 4 ultimate, which would be really good. But I don't want to recast this every 4 seconds. That's my problem. See, I don't want to recast this every time, every 8 seconds for 4 ultimate, because it would be a waste of my time. It would impede my speed of casting abilities. And I don't want to impede my casting time of my character, because I have to keep that damage shield that it gets applied to me a lot. And me casting this doesn't do damage to bring that damage shield to be applied. And it's a good ability, don't get me wrong, because it gives me major sorcery. And I could go with the morph for the magic, which removes one negative effect. But one negative effect on me isn't going to even be that bad either, because I have those damage shields, which is going to override any negative effect, unless it's something that slows me or anything like that. And then even then, I do have Winter's Embrace, and I do have Icy Aura, which reduces the effectiveness of snares applied to me by 15%. So it really doesn't matter if I have it applied to me or not. Now, it is a good thing, but at the same time, this gives me 7 or 8% max health, and I need that extra max health in the gear setup I'm running. If I was running Ebon Armor, then I could run Betting Edge. But if I'm running Ebon Armor, I'm not going to be running Ice Heart. And I need that Ice Heart to give me that damage shield. So I'd have to run Bone Shield instead. So this gives me a better way of keeping things more sustained to me, and keeps things more active to me, and it doesn't mean I have to rely on somebody else to do the job that I need to do. Because if I'm using Bone Shield, or my healer's trying to put a damage shield on me, or somebody else is trying to do this or this or this, I'm already doing all that myself, and I'm self-sustaining. That's one of the reasons why this build works so effectively, is because it's designed to be self-sustaining. That means if the healer goes down, the tank can maintain themselves for a good long period without the aid of the healer on a boss. Unless that boss hits me with the ability that hit that healer that nuked him. And even then, my damage shields will absorb almost 15k damage. So it's 14,000 damage shields. So even with that, it doesn't matter. Alright. So that's it. And this, like I said, this is a floater spot. You're only one and only floater spot that you could use. You could put something else here. Now, once I get Undaunted, I could run Tri-Stat Food. So that means on the back bar, I could switch to using a Sword and Board. And I could run Pierce Armor. And I wouldn't need this anymore. But I'd have to be up close and personal with the boss. And I'm going to be there anyway. So Pierce Armor would be a better option for me then. And then I could put Heroic Slash on there. I could put Reverberating Bash on there. In this spot, I could put that, and I could put Pierce Armor here. So I could do that when I get my Undaunted Metal, but I can't do it until then. And the reason why is because I need that extra stuff. And when I'm on the Sword and Board, I would I would probably put Stamina on it just to keep these abilities with a higher pool. And if I need to block while I'm on that bar, I can. So. But right now, it's not good for me to switch out to my 2 Ice Staves for those 2 benefits, because I would lose some effect of my character. Now, I could go craft me a Sword and Board, which would be really cool, and I could go get the Master Sword or the Maelstrom Arena Sword for tanking and have it on the back bar with a crafted shield, which would be really awesome as well. And then I could run an Infused Sword on the back bar with a charged Ice Staff on the front bar, and I wouldn't need Heroic Slash at all, because Heroic Slash is just going to generate me a little bit of extra ultimate, which is going to be fine, but it applies Minor Maim. I'm already doing that. I'm already doing a ton of that, so I don't need that for that, and I don't need the extra ultimate really, because I'm going to generate enough ultimate because I focus on doing a lot of heavy attacks from my Ice Staff. I would be switching to this bar to just apply Pierce Armor and maybe Reverberating Bash. Or maybe to use defensive posture so I can get that extra block chance or something. But other than that, there would be no need for me to be on this bar. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is there's no need for me to need the Sword and Board right now. And when I do trials, I wouldn't be on the Sword and Board bar hardly ever anyways, except to apply Pierce Armor and Heroic Slash. The rest of the time I'd be on the front bar using those other 3 abilities to keep Minor Maim active 100% of the time. And I can do that with this setup right here. So either way you go, though, you can do it. So I'm just letting you guys know it is an option if you want to run Sword and Board. But wait until you get Undaunted Metal so you can use Tri-Stat Food to boost your stamina pool up a little bit. You'll have roughly about a 17, almost 18k stamina pool then with the Undaunted Metal, because I believe when I use Tri-Stat Food, so we'll go ahead and just pop some Tri-Stat Food to see. Yeah, see, I go down to 27 on the back bar, 29 on the front bar, 29 and 14k. and now you increase that by 6%. It's not much, but it's going to put me over 15k stamina and health and magicka. And anything I put into stamina is going to be increased by another 9% or 6% because I am a Nord, so I'm going to get an increase in that. So you could run sword and board on the back bar for pierce armor and that, but you're going to be focusing on the main bar anyways, so there's no real reason, again, to have it. So now let's go ahead and show this build. Well, you know, we'll go ahead and show the champion points, and then we'll show the build in action for you guys. So let's go ahead and go over the champion points. Starting with the steed tree, of course, we have 23 into Ironclad. This gives us a 10% reduces the damage taken from direct damage by 10%. Here we have 20 points in Spell Shield, increasing our spell resistance by 1900. Over here we have 23 into Thick Skin. This reduces our damage taken from damage over time by 10%. Hardy and Elemental Defender are both at 10% with 43 points into them. This is going to reduce a lot of damage we take by 10%. And then, of course, we have 10% in Elemental or Expert Defender, which reduces light and heavy attacks. Any light and heavy attack you take is considered direct damage. So you get 10, 20, 30% reduced damage from that because of Elemental Expert and the... sorry, not Elemental Expert, Elemental Defender and Hardy. So you get 30% damage reduction from that. And on top of that, I'm a Nord, so I actually get 36%. But you're not going to notice that 36% unless I can boost these all, my Hardy and Elemental Defender up an extra 4% to get an extra 10% out of it, would I notice it. Otherwise, you really don't notice that 6% extra damage mitigation. Because it is not additive, multiplicative, it just gets, it's not blah blah blah, it gets added to these resistance values, guys. And it makes it really easy to work with. Now I could do this, I could take these down to 4%, so I get 10% from the Hardy and Elemental Expert, because I'm a Nord, and then I would have the 30%, and then I could boost my resistance values with those with the points I take out of them, giving me greater resistances, and would make my character more effective. I do have 23 into Bastion, 23 into Thick Skin, reducing damage I take from damage over time by 10%. And this 10% stacks with these 10%, this 10% stacks with these, and this 10% stacks with any light and heavy attack you do that's done against you. So, next up, 23 into Bastion. This increases the effect of your damage shields by 10%. I'm not a healer, I don't need to boost it by 20%. To make my damage shields more powerful. I could, but it's really not necessary because I get enough out of my damage shields. Next up, I have 9 into Quick Recovery. This just gives me a little bit of extra healing received. I get 9% for wearing heavy armor, so this little 2% is just that little extra to put me over that 10% mark, and I'll put more into it as I get points. Next up, we have Heavy Armor Focus of 20 points with 1900 extra resistances. Moving on to the green tree, we have 23 into Warlord, giving us 10% reduced cost to break free, because even though break free is a stamina ability, having that reduced cost is going to be beneficial to you. It's going to make it really easy for you to get out of those tight situations where you get stunned or you get knocked down. You can break free, and it's not going to use a huge section of your resource pool of stamina. Reduced cost of bash by 10% by having 16 points in here. Tanks bash a lot. Or at least they should. Anytime they see an enemy casting an ability or something that they can break them out of, like a healer using a Resto Staff on PvE, you can run up and bash them and knock them out of that so they can't heal, and it'll set them off balance. Some enemies will go to do a heavy attack. You'll see them start sparkling. If you bash them at that time, you can knock them out of that, which will set them off balance. So it's a really nice way to just keep enemies under control. Next up, we have 43 into Arcanist. I really didn't need this, but because I'm wearing heavy armor and I use mostly magic abilities, I wanted the higher recovery, even though I only have a 14%. Actually, I have an 18% right now of magic recovery because I'm wearing 2 pieces of light armor instead of the medium. So I get 2 pieces of light armor benefit. Once I get that medium piece in there, I won't have that 14% anymore, so by then I will be able to still maintain a 14% magic recovery. So losing 4% won't be so bad. Losing a 10% bonus would be greater, so I don't want to lose that. Next up, I have 43 into Tenacity. This one increases my magic and stamina return from fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. Since I'm focused on ice magic, I want to use an ice staff so I can keep my ice magic coming in. So those heavy attacks that I do with my ice staff is going to give me greater resource return on it. Because this gives me normally 30, this gives me another 10. I'm wearing heavy armor, which gives me 25. That's 65% return of my resources when I do a heavy attack. So it's a really, really good idea to use that. Next up, we have 16 in the Befoul. This is if I am running a sword and board. My reverberating bash is increased by 16%. I wish I could get it up to 20%, because then that 20% would make my reverberating bash reduce their healing received by 36%. There's only certain enemies in PvP or PvE that you need to use it on. Healers, anyone being healed, certain bosses like Bandage Cells boss, both 1 and 2, a Dire Frost Keep boss. There's a couple other bosses in the game that I can't name right or think of right off the bat that do have heals. So if you can reduce their heals by 36%, it makes a huge difference. Especially like in Dire Frost Keep. If you keep that reverberating bash on her and keep it applied, that Major Defile, it reduces her healing received by 36%. That means her health coming in when she does that thing with the staff where she grabs a hold of you and starts sucking the life out of you and giving it to herself isn't going to be as effective on her. It's going to be reduced by a lot. 36% is a lot. So you want to try and make sure that you maintain stuff like that. Moving on, we have 23 into Tumbling. This gives us a 10% reduced cost in dodge rolling. This is really beneficial for a tank to have a cheaper cost in dodge rolling, especially in heavy armor, so you're not burning through those resources as much. Next up, Shadow Ward. We have reduced the cost of block by 20%. You add this to the staff bonus of 30% reduced cost. It's a 50% reduced cost in blocking. It's really effective because it reduces that block cost, which is like 2,000 something stamina or magicka. You cut that in basically in half. So you take that 2,000 something and cut it in half. So it's like barely over 1,000 magicka I will be using to block. Moving on over here, we have 18 in Blessed. I know you guys would be like, why don't you have more? Well, I don't need more. I'm a tank. But my job is to tank primary, secondary, do damage. The reason why is because the more damage the total group is doing, the more damage you're doing the boss, the faster the boss dies. And I know what you're going to say, well, tanks really can't do that much damage. I can push on this tank almost 15k DPS a second. I've already tested it on 3 different skeletons. So this right here is just beneficial for you mostly, for this build, because Arctic Blast is your main heal. It does nice damage and it does a nice heal, so you want this there to keep that heal coming in, to keep that just a little bit extra healing coming into yourself for that purpose. Next up, we have 23 in Elfborn. This one increases the damage and healing of your critical strikes with magic abilities by 10% with 23 points. Moving on down here, we have 43 in Elemental Expert. This increases your Frost, Flame Frost, and Shock and magic damage by 10%. Since you are focusing mostly on frost damage, increasing it by 10% is going to be super beneficial. Because you also get 6% increase for being a Warden. If you don't know what I mean, if you go into the Warden tree and you go into Winter's Expert, down here, Piercing Cold increases your magic and frost damage by 6%. So I get a 16% increase in my frost damage for having those points there. If I could get this up to 14, I could actually do 20% frost damage on my character, which would mean that it would be greater damage I'm doing that's applying to the group's total damage, which means the more damage all of us are doing together. Alright, moving on, we have 35 in the Staff Expert. This one increases the damage done with light and heavy attacks for destruction and restoration staffs by 20%. That means when you charge up that heavy attack and you let it go, that's 20% more damage. This does stack with Elemental Expert, making it 30%. But I also have 56 in Master in Arms, which increases my direct damage done by 20%. That heavy attack is a direct damage ability, so it's 40 or 50% increase in damage. Actually, 56% increase in damage because of the 6% extra I get. So, and then you add in this 60% from my criticals, because base critical damage is 50%. I just increased it by 10. That's 60% increase. That 66% damage just got increased. I can crit with my character about 10 to 12k right now when I can get a lot of things applied and I can bring down their resistances even more. I've created as high as 24k with this character, with my ice staff. I know, but you're not a damage dealer. But hey, 24k damage every 2 seconds. You tell me, would you much rather have that in your group, or would you rather have somebody doing 5 to 6k every 4 to 8 seconds? Alright, moving on. This one increases is Thaumaturge. We have 23 points. This increases my damage done with damage over time by 10%. That means my ice walls, my gripping shards, and my Arctic Blast are increased by 10%. So it increases that damage overall, which is really good. And this does stack with the 16% I get over here. So that's actually 26% that those things do when they're doing the frost ticking. So it's a lot better off that I have that. And then I have 22 in the spell erosion, of course, give me 2,000 spell penetration. But that's pretty much it for the build. Now, I do want to show you guys the build in action. I'm going to go ahead and take on this boss. If it kills me, if it doesn't kill me, it kind of shows that this tank build is pretty good. Now, I haven't tested it in a trial situation yet, but I have tried it and tested it in a lot of the vet dungeons and a lot of the DLC dungeons as well. I've tested it in a few of them. Was it White Gold Tower and Cradle of Shadows? I tested in both of them, and it did fine. So let's go ahead and let me take off my walk, and let's go ahead and get started with this. So you're going to start on the back bar. You're going to hit your number 4 key to bring up your ice shields. You're going to put this on the enemy, and then you're going to hit them with taunt, flip bars, entropy, ice wall, ice spikes, and this. And you're just going to keep this just going all the time. If your health starts to go down too much, just use Winter's Embrace. And don't worry about it. As long as you can keep that ice wall up, you will keep the adds on you pretty much all the time. As long as you can keep ice wall up, it applies chill to them, and it keeps it applied all the time. And if I hit that enemy, I just applied, or I have a chance of applying chill against them. And they are chilled right now, so... But you can see here, I'm actually fighting a lot of mobs at once. And you'll see that they say all immobilized. If I'm in a group, when my DPS hits them, they're going to just melt those guys because they can drop their AoEs right on them. So it's a really good benefit that I can do that. Now, when you're fighting a boss, you want to keep that, you want to make sure that you flip bars every once in a while. Hit them with the heavy attack from this to do the crushing. Taunt them if you have to. Oops, get up. Get up, chick. Gonna go ahead and do this. See, you want to keep that damage shield coming up, because the more you keep your damage shield up, the less damage your character is going to take. Anytime your ultimate comes off, fire it. The reason why you're going to want to fire it is to reduce the damage you can take, and it also applies against the damage shields. So that means your damage shields are going to take less damage. So anytime that comes off of cooldown, get it, just keep it going like this. So you can pretty much keep this up all the time. Because anytime you do crits, every 6 seconds you get that damage shield. Every time you do a heavy attack, you get a small damage shield. And as you see, you barely ever run out of resources. Or out of health, because your damage shields mitigate that much damage. Now, I'm only doing this by myself. I know it's not a challenging boss. But I've never seen anyone else really solo this. Not even a really good super DPS character have I seen them solo this. A lot of people die really fast in this fight because they can't manage doing that kind of damage up front. And maintaining it as well, so... That's what I was talking about by interrupting. Now you can see I'm actually using Tri-Stat Food and I'm still doing fine. So I could be, like I said, I could be running Sword and Board on the back bar. But I don't need it. And if I was in a group, the thing I apply to the enemies, the fire, or the elemental thing would actually apply to the boss and just stay on him. As you can see, it's still applied to him because it lasts for 21 seconds. So whenever I do damage, that gets reapplied. And the more damage that you're doing, the more damage that, or more chances you have of applying that damage shield. Oops, wrong button. And ultimate will be up in a second. Fire it off. Like I said, you want to keep that ultimate out just as much as you do anything else. And that's because you want to keep that damage reduction on your group as much as possible. Even in a trial situation, having that damage reduction on there, regardless of what a lot of people think, is going to be more important than applying the, like applying Warhorn even, maybe. Because somebody else could apply Warhorn for you instead, and then you can focus on all this other stuff, so. And once he dies, that's it. Game over, man, game over. 13K. And that's it. Boss is dead. Got my Witchman shield, got my reward. I'm moving out of that dungeon, I'm moving on. So that's pretty much how the build works. As you can see, it's really good at self-sustaining, it's really good at self-survivability, and it's just really kind of a good overall build for self-sufficiency and everything else. There's a reason why you use Ice Heart, though, is for that damage shield. There's a reason you use Julianus is to increase your critical chance, give you a little bit of extra damage. That really helps your group. On top of that, using the willpower, it gives you some healthy, some health stuff. It gives you that max magic. It gives you that little bit of extra spell damage. And compared with this, these two sets together is the comparison of having two 5-piece sets equipped. So that means I could get a charged Maelstrom staff, go with the Maelstrom sword, and then get a Maelstrom, or get a shield of any kind and equip it, or craft it and equip it, and then I can have a tank build that uses both sword and board for the taunting and everything like that. And I have an ice staff, and I can block with either one, get these really cool reduced costs, and I get this damage shield that stays on me pretty much non-stop, as long as I'm doing ice damage. So you have a lot of different play styles with this, a lot of interesting things that you can do, and it's just a matter of how you choose to play the build. So that is the Northern Wind version 2.0, guys. I hope you guys liked it. I know I'm loving it, but if you guys do really like it, hit that like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. I try to release a video on a weekly basis, but right now kind of things are going slow because I'm working on a lot of different builds because of the changes that came with Horns of the Reach, with Morrowind, and learning another factor about the game that I'll be bringing up in another video tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about gear sets and how gear sets fit with your character and your design of your build, and why they're designed this way, or designed the way they are, to give you that kind of benefit. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So, until next time, guys, have a wonderful day. This guy will see you all later. Bye.